Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's Speakers for Schools broadcast. We're delighted you've been able to join us today. This session will last around 45 minutes and will include a presentation from our speaker before later moving on to student Q&A. Questions for our speaker can be submitted via the Q&A function underneath the stream on your screen. You may have to scroll down a little bit to see that. It will be open throughout the broadcast, and we do encourage you to submit questions in response to anything said today, as we always love to hear from you. If you're experiencing any issues, please also let us know via the Q&A box, and we will try our best to support you. Today, we're excited to welcome Nigel Twumasi, co-founder and director of My Armada. Thank you for joining us today, Nigel. We're looking forward to this presentation, and I'm going to hand over to you now.
Cool. All right. Yeah, no, thank you for having me. So, like I said, I'm going to talk for a bit about my journey about video games, maybe about anime, manga. We'll see how it goes. But mostly about everyone watching and what the video games industry could potentially mean for yourselves other than playing games. So I'll talk a bit about my career path, and then we should have time for questions at the end. Always keen to know what questions people have. So feel free to ask questions at the end. But yeah, I'm going to talk a bit about myself for a little while. So bear with me. So my name's Nigel, and I'm the co-founder of My Armada. So as a whole, we do different things across creative industries, comics, games events, content, all of it I'm going to talk about. But first, I'm interested to know. So I'm going to ask some rhetorical questions. So I'm not looking for answers right now, but I want you to think about a few things. So one, your favorite video game. Have a think. Hopefully you've got an answer for that. Two, if there are any anime, manga fans, any impactful anime or manga you've come across recently. I'll also extend that to comics, Western comics, Marvel, DC. That's cool too. And number three, what are you best at, or what would you like to be best at as well? So 3 questions, have them in your mind, and I'll come back to those a bit later. But My Armada. So like I said, I'm the co-founder of My Armada. So I'd like to describe ourselves as a manga brand. So we make manga within our own universe of characters. And this is a talk mostly about video games, so I'll try not to detour too much into anime and manga, but we are really into anime and manga. You can see a photo here of our latest manga release, myself as well. So we have our own universe of characters. I am a writer, and on our team is an illustrator, Penali, who does an amazing job of visualizing all of our stories. And we have what is a now growing number of young, or at least younger than me, artists, narrative designers, and people who are interested in bringing stories to life, who we've been able to make space for on our team, which is a really great thing. And then alongside that, so we started with manga, and about I think a decade ago was our first manga title, and we've been making them ever since. And along the way, the brand, the business has evolved into workshop delivery. So we do like workshops at schools, colleges, with adults as well, creative workshops across comics, video games. I do a lot of talks at events at schools. We do events as a brand, a lot of video game events, which I'm going to be talking about for the most part. So it's quite an eclectic mix, I'd say, of different creative endeavors. So hopefully we've got some creatives in the audience, and again, interested to know what questions come up at the end. So in a nutshell, that's our brand. We are a storytelling brand. We're a manga brand, and we use storytelling to develop creativity in other people. We're very big on that. We also do content. So we do a podcast. We also do live streams on Twitch and YouTube. That's something I've had to learn recently. But we do a podcast called Story X Story, where we talk about stories. We also interview creative professionals across industries. And it's been an interesting, like that in itself has been an interesting journey, because we get to speak to people from different industries in different positions, some just starting out, some very experienced, some well-known companies you would have heard of. And we also just get to talk about stories. So when I do talks like this, I always end up talking about at least one story that has just like captured my imagination. And what I like to do, and I do this often on the podcast, is pull out lessons, because I always feel good stories have lessons that you can apply to life. So we recently did an episode on The Wild Robot, which is a fantastic animation. If you haven't seen it, go watch that. But I'll try and talk around it and not to give too many spoilers for those who haven't seen it. But the idea is this robot has found themselves in a completely foreign land, where there's no humans, only animals. Has to figure out their purpose, has to figure out how to communicate with people, how to survive, and how to complete their mission. So along the way, there's what I found so many good lessons for my own journey. So I'm going to pull a few out as we go. But one of the first things, as I said, we started with comics and then developed into video game events, into workshops, into content, into working with some organizations I never would have thought I'd be working with at the beginning. And sometimes when I look back, I feel like this robot. So this is Roz, the protagonist of the story, and she's kind of like dropped in, and it's almost like you feel like you've been dropped in sometimes when I look back at where I've gone, where I've come from. And it's a wild feeling when you sit and think about it. But if you've ever had that feeling where you feel like you've just been dropped in somewhere and you don't quite know everything that's going on, that is a very familiar feeling. I know a lot of people, myself included, who have that feeling of, I don't quite know what I'm doing all the time. So I felt very connected to Roz there. So, but we'll come back to that in a second. So I'm going to talk about, like I said, the gaming side of what we do and how that developed. So at this point, we'd already had at least our first comic. I can't remember how many comics we had when we started doing video game events. But myself and my friend who I started this with, Lau, that's him in the orange t-shirt. We started the brand. We are both engineering graduates. So I studied engineering in university. I worked as a software engineer for a time, and for whatever reason, I decided to leave a software engineering job to go and make comics and start my own business. That in itself is a whole other talk, especially the part where I had to explain that to parents. But yeah, we'll leave that for another day. But myself, Lau, we had this idea. We had our first comic, but we didn't know much about business. So I'd never studied business. The only degree I have is engineering. I had never made a comic before, so we didn't really know what we were doing. But we had this passion for comics, for Japanese culture, for storytelling, for creativity. I wanted to make something that was ourselves. So one of the first things we found is that it's very difficult to make something new. Well, I should say it's pretty straightforward to make something new. It's difficult to sell something new to people who have no idea what it is and maybe don't care about your journey. So we started to do this thing that at the time we didn't realize, but it's called marketing. So we had to do something. Once we had this comic, we had to do something to get it out and let people know about it. So we decided to start a video game event. We called it Gamepad. Very simple premise. People would come, play video games, but we would bring our brand to it. So we would present the event in a way that made people like our brand, made people know about our comics, what we do, want to come back to another event, or even pick up a comic as well. So we were on our way. We started building this event. We were doing different events every so often. We were building up a community of people who would come back, new people, and we started connecting with the games industry. So we had Nintendo supporting us, we had Ubisoft supporting us with the event, and it was working. It was working. We were on our way, but sometimes when you have a plan, things don't always follow the plan, because this was all before COVID, and from then on, we could no longer do our event because it was an in-person event. We couldn't be in person with people. So one of the things, going back to that feeling in the Wild Robot, being thrown into situations that you didn't necessarily ask for, that aren't necessarily your fault, but you do have to deal with them and adapt. And that's one of the things I really like about that story, that it reminds me about the power of adapting to the situation around you. So we had the situation where we're in the pandemic, didn't know how long it was going to last. We had to do something, because as a brand, as a business, you can't really stand still. Otherwise, people will forget you. So we had to do something. So we did something. We went onto Twitch, and this is where I learned how to pivot. There's a phrase in business called pivoting. Is when you were doing one thing and then for whatever reason switch positions and started doing a new thing. We had to rewrite the plan. So we had to use Twitch. We started doing online events. We started our podcast around then and really like dove into doing that on a regular basis. And we started connecting more with the video games industry. And what I found, because at that point we were doing games events, we were doing workshops. So I was going to different schools and colleges and talking to people like yourselves. And we were also connecting with the games industry. So we kind of saw that the games industry is on one level really well known. I'm sure, hopefully, one of my questions sparks something and you can all think of a game that you at least played recently, if not your favorite. So people play games, but we realized people didn't always know about the opportunities that are in the games industry and from a career perspective. And vice versa, the games industry hasn't always been the best at finding young talent like yourselves. So we saw I'd say a problem. We saw a problem, and that's part of the thing about business. You see a problem, you try and solve it. So while we were doing the content, the live streams on Twitch, the podcast, and talking to people and going to events, I was doing talks where I could. We started up something. We started up a specific campaign called "Do I Look Like a Gamer?" So this is something we had a little bit of an idea of just before the pandemic. Plans were put on hold, and then by the time we came out, so this was 2022, we fully went into this. So the "Do I Look Like a Gamer" campaign is all about challenging the negative perceptions around the word gamer, and then showcasing pathways into the games industry for young aspiring talent from different backgrounds. And we did that because as I connected more with the games industry, I found more of the holes. So for me, I'm born and raised in Tottenham, northeast London, and I didn't necessarily go to the best school. Actually, I statistically went to one of the worst schools, actually. So it was a place where opportunities weren't always apparent to me, to people around me. So in the games industry, they do a census. So they survey the games industry, who's working in it, and to find like where the gaps are. And one of the statistics that really shocked me is that the percentage of people working in games from Black and Asian mixed or other ethnicity is quite low. It's like, I think the last census is like 14%, which is, I mean, it's low in itself. It's also lower than the equivalent in the working age population as a country. So to me, that seems like a problem. That says to me there's a lot of people who might want to work in games if only they knew they could. The other thing is video games is having a bit of a crisis, different crisis, but skills crisis is one of them. So there's a lot of gaps in games where companies are looking for people who can do specific things, and there aren't enough of those people who can do that thing. So that, again, is a problem. So with the "Do I Look Like a Gamer" campaign, we wanted to do our bit to try and address that. So it's a mix of things. This is Tazzy. She's our creative director. And this is the first year of the campaign where her and myself were in the photos. So as part of the campaign, we find a bunch of people in the games industry and take their photo, kind of like this. And we do that because we want to showcase the representation that does exist. So we try and find people from different geographical areas, of different skill sets, different ethnicities, different gender, as much diversity as we can fit. And then we take the photo and display them as part of the campaign. We do this online and in person. Then we do a bunch of events. And this year, because we have this year's campaign in the works, We do different events that are free to attend. People can come and join, and they're all aimed at getting people closer to the games industry. So we've got our roundtable event. So we'll talk to different professionals in the games industry. We've got our networking event where we'll invite people to come and play games. People can network with people who like games as well. Also, some people in the industry. So in this photo, this is us in King's Cross. There's people who work in the games industry, like content creators or developers, whatever it might be. And then we do a game design event. So come and learn about designing games. We do a tabletop version, learn about the fundamentals of game design. And again, we try and mix in people from the industry to come and check it out. So yeah, so that is in a nutshell is what we do as part of the event. And then, like I said, in the event, there is a skills crisis. So the games industry right now is actually going through a difficult time. You may or may not have heard. It's going through a difficult time, skills-wise, economic-wise, and it is a challenge. And it does mean there is a difficult path, but not an impossible path. And I think for the people watching, for yourselves, it means there's an opportunity if you know what is ahead. For me, it meant it meant opportunity and like I said, adapting and taking advantage of what we do as a brand and how that can help. For you, it means if you know what's coming in the games industry, it means you can adapt from where you are and put yourselves in a position to take advantage and potentially work in the games industry. And what I learned through that is adaptation and understanding the games industry will put yourself in a position where things will happen. And like I said, from the beginning of this, feeling like I've been dropped in and not knowing exactly what's going on all the time, to now being able to work in some positions that I just never thought would be possible. So this is me. I'm somewhere in there. This is at an event called Develop, and it is the UK's biggest games conference, games business conference. So this was a couple years ago. I did a talk about diversity in video game storytelling. And when they accepted my pitch, I had to pitch for it. I had to give the overview and all that. I didn't know if anyone would show up. It was the last day of the conference. Wasn't quite sure. I'd never been before. This is the room. People showed up. So I was surprised. But then I guess in a way I shouldn't have been, because when you're doing something that connects with you and also connects with other people, like I said, things happen. And then more things kept happening. So this is me on stage at BAFTA. So BAFTA have their own games initiative as well. So I've been on panels at BAFTA. I'm also on the Young BAFTA advisory committee, so talking about a lot of their initiatives across games, animation, awards, things like that. This is also me at City Hall. So as well as the work I do with BAFTA, I'm also on the London Mayor's Cultural Leadership Board. So I help advise on the mayor's strategy when it comes to creative things in the capital, when it comes to my perspective on working with young people on skills development, things like that. And what's wild is I didn't necessarily ask for all of this. It sort of just happened, which sounds kind of funny to say, but I found myself in a position where people offered the opportunities to me, and then it was up to me to take it. But I didn't necessarily set out to do everything I'm doing now. So it's a good reminder for you, because back to Wild Robot, like I said, fantastic animation. There's a moment in this where the main character, Roz, doesn't know the language. So like I said, there's no humans, there's just animals, and she can't understand them. So there's a moment early on where she sits down like this and just studies, literally just studies and listens to what the animals are saying to each other. And over time, and it's a sped up sequence, but over time learns the language. And I feel that's so important. It's such a great lesson to learn, because it's something I had to do. And if you're someone who wants to work in the games industry or any industry really, it's so important to learn the language. So there are certain events happening in the games industry. I've mentioned a couple of them. Develop, BAFTA do different events. There are so many different events. There are, depending on where you want to go, if you want to be a developer, if you want to be in HR, if you want to be in marketing, understanding the language, understanding what the people who work in the video games industry talk about, what's coming in the industry, which I'll sort of try and hint at in this talk, but taking some time to learn the language. You might have your own favorite video games, you might have types of games that you like, but if you want to be a developer, for example, it's important to know more than what you just know and understand the language. So another lesson there. So when it comes to the video game industry, one of the things I had to learn as well is how vast it is and how many opportunities there are. Because a lot of the time people think of video games, well, actually people think of video games as literally just playing video games. I think most people, when they think of the games industry, that's all they think about. But there's more to it than that, obviously. But when it comes to making games, a lot of people think of two things. They think of coding, so programming, and they think of art. And yes, these are two of the roles in gaming and often the most commonly thought of, but it's not the total of it. So there are so many roles available, and it depends who you are, what you like, what you think you're good at, what you want to be good at will shape where you go. So you could go into production, so the type of people who are organized and can work with other people to help them do what they need to do. Project management, I find myself doing a lot of project management in what we do, but also marketing. So if you're maybe a bit more on the creative side, marketing, social media marketing, other promotional marketing, community management is a major one. There's a lot of games companies. In fact, most to all of games companies are really interested in how to build a community to market the games, to make a connection with players. And if you're good at that, if you're a people person, if you're patient, because you need a lot of patience for that, I couldn't do it. I don't always have that kind of patience. But if you're good with people, passionate, then that might be an area where you don't even necessarily have to be making the games, but you're helping get the games out, which is such an important part, especially today. So it depends on what you're into and what you're good at, what you enjoy, and that's going to shape your path. And it's definitely shaped my path as well. And as I look back, even the slides that I've just shown you, the opportunities, there's a few other sort of positions I'm in as well. There's another scene in the Wild Robot where one of the characters says a line, which is one of my favorite. It's now one of my favorite film lines of all time. Essentially, there's a character who doesn't quite believe in themselves because they're different from the others. And it's sort of highlighted, they're teased a little bit, they're shunned. But because they're different, that's what helps them succeed in the end. So the line is, I don't know actually if people can see it because I think I'm blocking it a little bit, but the line is fly like you, not like them. And it's such a great analogy for what myself and people on our team have had to do, where at one point we might have thought some of our character traits were the reason that we wouldn't succeed, where actually it is the reason that you will succeed. So for me, I used to be a developer. I'm not anymore. I've forgotten so much of what I did in my old job. So I don't make games, and there are times where I feel a bit awkward talking to people who do make games about making games. But the benefit I have is I bring a different perspective as a storyteller in comics, bringing that over to video games. Also, as someone who works a lot with young people, where there is a skills crisis in video games, I can bring a perspective that people in the games industry might not have. So who you are, what you have, where you've come from is often the reason that you will succeed, but only if you remember it and keep it in mind and really own it. So, as I said, we have this campaign, and part of the campaign, we talk to different people in the games industry. And as we're taking their photos for the photo campaign, we also profile them. So we ask them questions, and we also ask them advice. So we take photos of 40 different people. So I'm not going to do everyone. We don't have time for that. But you can check out the website to see the full profiles for everyone. But what I thought is I'd bring some selection of them. So I've given you some advice, and hopefully that sunk in. But it's also good to hear from the people who, like I said, are making games, are supporting the games industry, the games culture in some way, to see what they think. So I've got a few for you. And one of them is a content creator called Bangham. And when we talked to him, I think this was March, maybe February, March, we took his photo in. He said one of the things he'd say to his younger self is to tap into your creative side now. And I get that sense from a lot of people around my age, where they're in a position that is great for them, but they wish they'd started earlier, or they wish they'd owned it earlier. So you're all now in that position that he said he was in when he wished he would start his creative, he would tap into his creative side. So remember that you're in the position that you can still do something. Another great person is Maya, who says, or her advice would be to lean into the things that fascinate and obsess you. So the reason why I asked those three questions at the beginning, and hopefully people have got answers for, is it's really important, especially in an area like games. One thing I'd say about video games is it's full of people who genuinely like video games. And I know that sounds obvious to say, but I've talked to people in different industries who tell me that sometimes people in industry don't actually like what they're doing or the thing they make. Video games is full of people who really like making video games. And I think the reason I asked that question at the beginning is essentially, what do you like? Because a lot of the times that passion is going to show through, it's going to direct you. So if you actually lean into it, don't be embarrassed by it, even if your friends might not know about it, might not like it, especially if it's some weird, obscure anime, because there's a lot of those. But lean into it, because that passion is going to direct you in a place that's going to put you where you want to be. So lean into that. A nice and simple one from Sophie, who works at an indie developer. So she's an art director. And she just says, know what you're worth. And this is such a great reminder. And it's something I encourage. I mean, I encourage you to remember all of those quotes. But as you get older, as you get into positions of working for people, working with people, people offering you positions, know what you're worth. Because sometimes, a lot of the times, people won't know what you're worth, won't care what you're worth, or might tell you you're worth less than you actually are. So it's important for you to understand the value that you bring and how that can help another person. And that's why the third question I asked at the beginning was, what are you best at? Because if you know what you can do, if you know what value you have, you can talk to people differently and you can get what you deserve for that. And last one is from Mu, who used to work at Insomniac, which is wild. He got a job at Insomniac out of university in California, and so he's worked on some big titles, but he now has his own studio and he's making his own games. So we've interviewed him, and one of the things he said is that yes, there's technical skills, but as he says, focus on your communication skills as much as your technical skills. So when I was a software engineer, I didn't speak to anyone. Well, that's not true. I spoke to the people to my left and to my right and my boss. So I spoke to some people, but I spoke to people within the company. I didn't do any presentations. I didn't do any public speaking of any kind. It was only when I started my business and was put in positions where I had to essentially talk to people. Some people I knew, most people I didn't. And when building a team around the brand, talking to people to convince them to work with us, convincing them to do things, I found that those soft skills, communication, leadership, matter just as much, if not more, than the technical skills. So don't forget that as you're learning whatever you want to do, if it's art, if it's programming, if it's animation, there's a technical side to it you need to know. But if you can't communicate it, if you can't showcase it, if you can't convince someone that you are good at what you do, if you can't convince someone to give you an opportunity, it's not going to matter. So those communication skills are essential. So my takeaway is, well, hopefully you've got a few things from that. But I think looking back at my journey, I got one more point from The Wild Robot. If you can't tell, I really like this film. So one of my takeaways from this film that I felt applied to me is the story is essentially about this robot who has to go beyond what she's programmed for. And the journey is essentially about that. And I look back at my career where I thought it was going to go in one direction. So I thought software engineering was it. Turns out that wasn't the case. And from what I'm doing now, almost everything I'm doing now was not in any kind of plan except for making comics. And there are many situations in the past that I'm still going through now that remind me that I've had to go beyond what I knew at the time, beyond what I thought I was going to do, just generally beyond your programming. So for all you watching now, you are going to have to go beyond what you currently know to get what you want. And it's possible, it's essential, but as long as you know that, you won't be surprised when you might. So I've done things where I've put forth an effort and it hasn't quite worked out because I haven't learned the language, so I need to go back and learn the language. I didn't quite believe in what I was doing, so I had to go and sort that out. But either way, I had to go beyond what I knew at the time, what I was capable of at the time, and do more to get what I want. So yeah, hopefully that helps you think about how you can navigate your career path. Like I said, video games is going through a challenging time, but if you know what's happening, if you know the language, and if you know what you do and what you do best, you can navigate that successfully. So hopefully that helps. And like I said, I want to get to some questions from people. So I'd be interested to know what people are thinking. And also if you do have a favorite video game, comic, or want to tell me what you're best at, feel free.
Thank you so much. There's so much covered there and so interesting. One exciting career pathway you've had. We've got a great question to start with from Manor Green College. You've obviously alluded to having not started out where you are now. You've talked about having to learn new skills and you've talked about it being a challenging industry. Manor Green College want to know, why did you want to get into this business?
Why did I want to get? Because I was very ignorant and I didn't realize how difficult it was. No, it's funny. It's one of those things. It's a bit of a cliche, but people say like, if I'd known how difficult it was, I might not have done it. But I think for me, we had this passion when we started. We had this passion for like comics, like I said, Japanese culture. And I think I can't speak for my friend Lau, he's no longer in the business, but I can't speak for him. But personally, for me, I've always had this idea that creativity is misjudged. So I did programming, and in most places, people would think programming is not a creative outlet. But I worked with really smart people, and I was seeing people literally create something from nothing. So one day there was no program there. The next day we're making a program. It's there, it's out, it's having an impact. That's really creative. And I think for me in starting this business, one of my fundamental things was being able to create something that was built on a culture of creativity and would impact the world to show like, demystify what is creativity, what does it mean to be creative. So that was one part. And then the other part was, I think when we started working more with young people, and particularly where I'm from, like I said, where there's not a lot of awareness of the opportunities and not a lot of like progression forward, I think it became important to me to showcase that pathway, both from like perspective of young people to show like yourselves that this is something that you can do, but also from the industry who sometimes very frustratingly can't seem to find the talent where it is. So I like to think that as we build, as we grow as a brand, we can help connect those two sides who kind of need each other. So that's a couple of the driving forces for me.
Thank you for that. And we have an anonymous person who's responded to your question about video games. I used to play Doom, love that game. Now I'm more Candy Crush. I'm going to do a
That's
shout
a wild swing from Doom to Candy Crush. So you say Super Mario?
I am, yeah. The
okay,
more linear, the better. Little plinkety.
Yeah, classic. Can't go wrong with the classics.
But Tudor Grange Sandworth Academy are throwing it back at you, and I think this could take a while for you. What is your favourite video game and why?
Oh, that's easy. God of War. I've talked many times about this on the podcast. That's not a difficult question at all. It's the best. It's the best game. It's objectively and subjectively the best game. Full stop. The reason why is because it's a game where I think it's like the fourth in a long running franchise, but the recent one, they kind of redid it. They designed the character, his story, and they took what was a kind of 2D character, a fun character to play, but wasn't much to him, and added a whole layer of depth narratively and crafted this game that, in my opinion, does such a good job of blending like mechanics, like gameplay mechanics, with narrative, with a meaningful narrative in such a satisfying, emotionally resonant way, and it's just the best game. So
you're convincing me. I'm not a big gamer myself, but I always think that's when people say they're not a reader, they're not not a fan of sports. Maybe
yeah,
it's
you took the words out of my mouth. Yeah, it's a game. It's essentially, and it's also the narrative is it's a game about a man becoming a father at the foundation of it, and not wanting his son to make the same mistakes that he did. And it's just the way they've done it and wove it into the narrative is fantastic.
I love the sound. I'm going to look into that. Right. Okay. So a relevant question, in fact, from that point then, from some Bede School who pre-submitted this. If I'm not a gamer, but recognize that gaming is the future of entertainment and would like to be a part of that, is there a place for me?
That's a really good question. Yeah. So, I mean, I said earlier that games is filled with a lot of people who genuinely enjoy games, but that's not a barrier to they don't ask you, are you a do you play X amount of hours playing games? I think the main thing is having appreciation, which it sounds like you do, and respect for the craft of what you're doing, and then being able to bring that value. So I remember I interviewed someone at Splash Damage, who are AAA game developer publisher, and she came from photography, because I remember we were talking about like lighting in video games, which I hadn't really thought about. And she was able to bring the photography skills from a completely different world into video games and help, because lighting is a big thing in video games. So I think you don't have to be a, I don't know, quote unquote passionate gamer or have a extensive history of playing 100 games, but you have to have respect for the medium, obviously, and then the craft that you bring. And if you can display that, if you can showcase that, then yeah, there's a place for you.
Thank you. And you've talked about skills shortages, but you've also talked there about skills that from areas maybe people wouldn't know could be applied until you discover the new perspective that somebody's able to bring. We do have a question. What skills are needed in the gaming industry?
Oh, that's a really good question. So Yuki, who do a report, I think they do it every year or every so often, but they survey the games industry, who's working where, what positions, and it kind of showcases what's missing. So I mentioned art and coding, and those are quite well served. I'd say I don't have the full report to mind, but from when I last looked at it, things like narrative, so narrative design is a big thing, because narrative, I mean, I've just given an example with God of War, a lot of like Sony first party games, but even indie titles rely on narrative more and more. So gone are the days that it's just about the mechanics and it's just about, I mean, I'm doing a throwback here, but like Space Invaders, where you're just like shooting sort of pixels, and there's a narrative side to it, but it's quite new in games. So there's not a lot of people doing it, and the pathways to it aren't really set. But if you can design a narrative, and that's not just dialogue, that's world building, that's character development, that's a good skill. Another one I know of is anything that blends the technical with the artistic. So there's a role like, and I think the role was different, like different companies will call it something different, but I'll use the phrase technical artist. So it's someone who can draw, but then who can also apply that in a 3D model and animate it, and can, going back to what I said about knowing the language, can understand both. Because there might be people who just know how to draw, and that's fine. But if you can draw and you can do the technical side, you then become more valuable. So things like that. And then I mentioned community. So one of the big changes with video games is sort of a move away from traditional marketing channels, like let's say television adverts, or I mean, there still are big in-person events, but they're not as prominent as they once were. But what's happening is now people, or I say people, companies are tapping into community. So there's idea of looking for influences. I mean, I know a few people that were sent Nintendo Switch 2s. Unfortunately, I wasn't with them. I don't quite have that relationship with Nintendo yet. And earlier, who were sent PS5s, Xbox Series X's, because they've built an audience, and games companies want to tap into that so they can showcase the products in a more, I say, quote unquote, authentic way. So there's people who manage those relationships, but then also manage the not individual, but the group, the communities around it, bring them updates from the developers, take their questions and act as a go-between from the like development team to the players. So that's a role that's becoming more and more prominent. So like I said, if you're someone who is that people person, who has that patience, that enthusiasm, can communicate as well, that's another role sort of away from the development team, but very crucial in games.
Brilliant, thank you. And I have to say, I enjoyed your sort of allusion to sort of potentially having to convince parents, right? I mean, let's be fair to some of our parents; they might be very, very into all this stuff themselves, but it potentially is a developing new world, and you've alluded it also to some of the challenges in it. So we've got a great question from someone who's saying, where should I start looking if I want to move from school into the industry, but without a university stage?
Oh, without a university. So as in not going to university?
I guess. I mean, if you're going to say they ought to go to university, then, you know, you'll know best, but...
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So I've had this conversation with people in games who, because as of now, most of the people working in games have a degree, have some kind of degree. It might not be a games degree, but have some kind of degree. I've talked to people and I've challenged that a bit. And I as someone who went to university, I do have a degree, but I challenge that because I think it means the games industry is missing out on a lot of talent that isn't going to university. And university now is different than when I went. For one, it was much cheaper. I didn't pay for it when I went. Now it's the cost of it is meaning a lot of people aren't going to go to university. So I've challenged the games industry and people in it to think about how are you capturing those people. What I would say, if you're someone who might not take the university path, even if you are, but doubly so if you're not, is two things. One, you have to be able to show what you can do. That is so important. And even if you went to university, to a certain extent, grades will only get you so far. You have to be able to show what you can do. If you are a writer, you should be able to show you've written stuff. Like I can say I'm a writer and I can show you my comics. There's no question. If you're an animator, what have you animated? And so on. If you're in music, what have you done? So on and so forth. Have to be able to show what you can do. So I'd work on that, work on the craft, and work on being able to showcase I can do this. Because when it comes to meeting people, either applying for jobs or working with people, and they want to see what can you do, and people in companies might not say this exactly, but I would say the grades, they only care about it so much. At the end of the day, they want to know, can this person do the work that we are going to set them? Can they work with a team? So one, being able to show what you can do. And number two, I should have actually mentioned this in my in sort of the main bit of the talk, but networking. Networking is like, maybe it's number one. It might be number one in terms of like career progression, being able to connect with people, build relationship, professional relationship, sometimes even like friendship with people, but being able to build some kind of relationship where you are connected with them and they know what you can do. So it's actually one of the other reasons I asked the third question at the beginning in terms of what are you good at, because often when you meet people, so I'll meet people and we can talk games or comics. So I'll say, this is what I'm reading or watching. I'll tell them that God of War is the best game ever, and then challenge them when they try and say something else. It's not. But I'll also say, this is what we're doing. So we have this company, we are trying to do this. And it's sort of a, how can you help? Because what will happen is someone will say, oh, I know someone who can help with that. Or maybe I can help with that. Or have you tried looking here? So if you're someone who's not going to university, again, even if you are, but even more so if you're not, being able to network. So going to events, going to community meetups, talking to people. LinkedIn is a good one as well. being able to connect with people and letting them know who you are. So what are you into? What games do you like? What are you reading? Where are you traveling to? But also what you do. So what are you good at? Because then you don't know who they'll meet. They might meet someone and go, oh, I met this person. They're really good at writing. You should talk to them. And now you've got an opportunity. Most of my opportunities, I showed you the BAFTA stuff, the develop, being on the mayor's cultural leadership board. Again, none of that I asked for explicitly. Is because people know what I do, and they feel you should go and apply for this or talk to these people or should join this board. So networking is probably the number one thing you should be doing, regardless of university or not.
Oh, that's fantastic advice. And that is going to be my last question in a second, actually, about any advice for the young people on our call. But thanks so much to people submitting questions. I hate to miss them out, so I'm just going to share a couple with you, Nigel. People wondering games that have inspired you, how easy or difficult it is to learn different types of game gimmicks, and your favorite manga, and whether you play sports video games. So if any of those has grabbed you, you might cover it. You might be able to cover it.
Yeah, I can ring off some. Ironically, I don't play a lot of sports video games anymore, even though I'm very much into sports. I used to play a lot of FIFA, Pro Evolution Soccer, but for whatever reason, I don't play a lot of sports video games. Favorite manga, I don't know about favorite, but I am currently reading a manga called Sakamoto Days. Very funny. Love the premise. And then I'll try and get one more. What was the
gimmicks?
Gimmicks. In terms of I'll say mechanics. So it depends on the game. I think I would say it's very difficult to make games. This is something I've learned talking to people. But as to different, I'm not sure if you mean mechanics when you say, or when the person said gimmicks, but I would say it is difficult to learn games. If you're talking about playing games, I would say it's also difficult because I'm not necessarily the best player. Depends on the game. But I try and find what I enjoy, which is either games like Mario or Astrobot. You should probably check that out. Fantastic platformer, or narrative heavy games as well, or games I can play with friends or team. So
thank you. And for anyone who's wondering what a gimmick is, Google it. I mean, you can come away with, if you've come away with more questions, that's brilliant. It gives you some things to research. Thank you to the person who's also flagged their favorite video game, which you might be interested in, Nigel, is Uncharted 3 and an impactful anime called JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. As strange as it is, it shows the beauty of the human experience, which is a lovely thought.
And that is a strange one.
Yeah. Can you share any final thoughts and feelings with our viewers today, just before we end today's session?
Yeah, I would say so. See, I don't know exactly who's watching or where they're coming from, but knowing people are at school or on that part of the journey, I would say from where you are, keep in mind that the industries, if it's games, if you want to go somewhere else and then go to games or however it shakes out, the path is not a straight one. It's a winding curve one. So one of the things I'd say is have the expectation that the path is not supposed to be straight. I need to remind myself of that constantly. And then also that the picture you have now will change. So what I would say to people is, I've talked about learning the craft of things, finding what you're good at, what you're passionate about. I would focus on that and then see where it can apply, rather than being too fixed on a specific job at a specific company. Because one, the company might not be hiring like that. They might not exist in some years. The role might change, not exist. So if you're too fixed on a particular outcome, you might find yourself in trouble. But if you know, I can do X, Y, Z really, really well, I'm passionate about this and that, you can find a place wherever it might be.
Oh, thank you so much, Nigel, for taking the time to speak to our students about the gaming industry and just showcasing the importance of diversity in sharing those different stories and getting those different perspectives into the storytelling industry in particular. Unfortunately, we've ever so slightly overrun, and that is all we've got time for today. So a huge thank you to everyone who tuned in, and especially to those who put forward some great questions. A feedback poll should have gone live in the Q&A box. So if you've got anything to say about today's session, then please do let us know. And if you don't have time right now, don't worry, another feedback form will be shared with you shortly via email. Our speakers do always love to hear any feedback. So if you have a few minutes, we'd really very much appreciate that. Please make sure to look out for future broadcasts on the Speakers for Schools website. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day.